Hello, everyone. We're going to get started now. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Stone, and I'm going to be talking today about what to do if you are planning to reapply to MBA programs. So we'll go over some just general basics and logistics. Then we'll talk about how you can assess your application in order to figure out how you want to improve on it for the next time around. And then we'll talk about some other tips that I have for reapplying. And finally, we will do a conclusion and Q&A. If you'd like, throughout, you are welcome to post questions in the chat. I will answer them as they come in if they're relevant. And if I'm going to be covering it in a later part of the presentation, then I will do so at that point. So just to start off with a bit of an intro. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Stone, and I am a GSB alum. I also do MBA coaching, wide variety of stuff, but it does include people who are reapplying. So just to go over some general logistics around what reapplication looks like. So the first question that I often get when discussing reapplication with someone is, should they reapply? Will business schools be open to this? And the answer is yes. If you improve your application, they are very receptive to it. Some schools will even look at your application with fresh eyes, not even knowing whether you, reapplied or not, and they'll make sure that somebody else is looking at it so that so that you're really given a fair shot. And anecdotally, HBS actually says on their website, so that means it's official, that around 10% of their class each year consists of reapplicants. So it's definitely possible to do. And in my experience, I've seen that people who reapply tend to actually have quite good success because it really shows that they want it, and it shows that they are really authentic about about their goals. In terms of what reapplication looks like, so this is a bit school dependent. Some schools will just have you submit a normal application. Others have a reapplicant essay, which basically talks about what you've done to improve your candidacy since the last time around. Regardless, though, the expectation is that all of your materials are new or updated, which includes any recommendations, even if they're from the same person. In terms of when to reapply, so most schools will say that you can only apply once per academic year or once per cycle. So if you however, if you want to reapply in the next year, it's generally fine to reapply in any round. I'd say the one time when you may want to consider waiting for a later round is if you applied in round 3 and were rejected, just because it may be difficult to show that you've really demonstrated growth, that you've improved your candidacy, etc. But other than that, I'd say, yeah, it's very on the table to apply during round 1. And if you want, you can also reapply in future years. I know of people who have done that, where they took on a new job that was maybe a little bit closer to their post-MBA goals. They got more leadership experience, maybe a promotion, etc., and then they reapplied and they had success. So you also don't need to reapply right away to demonstrate that you still want to do it. And in terms of sort of like how I recommend going about your reapplication, I would say you want to start off first by figuring out what went wrong. So figuring out why you might have been, like rejected or waitlisted, etc., and then address it in your application. I also think that it's really important to sort of intentionally strengthen your candidacy. So what I mean by this is instead of just reapplying and saying, oh, this is what's changed since I applied last time, it's about actually like looking for opportunities in order to address weaknesses, in order to, demonstrate growth, in order to make your progress towards your post-MBA goals, etc., and not just kind of like let it happen to you. And finally, once you've strengthened your candidacy, then you want to reapply with better application materials the second time around. Things that I often notice are, somebody hasn't tailored their resume towards an MBA program because they do look for different things than a normal job resume does. Lack of cohesion in your narrative, so maybe certain things are kind of clashing with each other. And finally, essays that lack a certain amount of reflection or specificity tend not to do well in application. So working on that can be a really good way of showing that you are ready for business school, that you really want to go to that school, that you have continued to do your research and learn. So before I get into how to assess your application, I'm just going to go and check I'm just going to check and see if there's any questions. So if our goals haven't changed, how do we make the reapplication feel fresh? I will talk about that more in a later part of the presentation. And then once we get to the Q&A, I'll see if you have any additional follow-ups there. In terms of explaining why we're reapplying, I think that if you're applying to the same school, again, it's generally pretty clear. It's like you're reapplying because you still want to go to the school. And how honest should we be about what went wrong the first time? So that really depends on the school. Like if a school asks how you improved your candidacy, then you definitely can mention that. But otherwise, you kind of just want to, put that throughout your application. It doesn't need to be like a dedicated section in like an optional essay or anything explaining, hey, I think this is what happened the last time around. Because first off, it may not actually be the case. And second off, a lot of these places, again, like they do look at your application with fresh eyes. So specifically calling those things out may not actually be in your favor. But thank you for those questions. And Marina Del Rey. I like Marina Del Rey. I used to live in LA. Okay, cool. So feel free to continue posting questions. I'm going to get back to the presentation now, and then once I reach another stopping point, I'll check the chat again. So as I mentioned earlier, now we're going to talk about how you can assess what went wrong in your application. So there's a few ways to do it. The first one is to get feedback from the admissions committee. So certain schools will give you feedback on your application. Usually it's like if you were waitlisted, or maybe it's like if you were interviewed and didn't get in or something like that. So in those cases, it's very good to ask them for feedback because they will tell you the actual reasons, why you were not accepted and how you can improve. And that will be better than what any admissions coach out there can tell you, because these are the people who are actually making the decisions. That said, not all schools do this. So if a school explicitly offers it in a formal communication, so that's a webinar, on their website, in an email to you, then it's on the table and you should definitely do it. But if they don't explicitly mention it, then if you reach out, the best you're going to get is we can't really share this, or, oh, we just had a really strong class this year, blah, blah. like you're not going to get anything of use, and you also risk annoying the admissions committee. So if you aren't able to get feedback from the admissions committee, some other things that you can do. One is to look at it yourself. So at this point, you're probably at least 5-6 months out from when you submitted your application the first time, if not longer. So I would recommend reading through the application yourself. I'll talk a little bit later about some of the qualities that I would recommend that you look through. But I would say, just be honest, be harsh on yourself, and try to figure out what you think went wrong. Another thing you can do is ask a friend or a colleague to look through it. This is helpful, especially if they have an MBA. But even if they don't, some things that I'd recommend doing are showing them the essays without telling them what the questions are and seeing if they can actually tell you what you're trying to answer. This especially works for the sort of like non-typical essays, like not like the why MBA, but something like tell me about a time when you displayed curiosity, or like what matters most to you and why type things. Another thing that can be good to see is to ask them after reading your application to explain your application to you, and see after one read if they can properly explain what your goals are, why you want an MBA, etc. Because if they can't do that after one read through, then there's a decent chance that the admissions committee couldn't either, which may be why you weren't admitted, because your application was hard to understand. And finally, working with a coach, hint, hint, shameless plug, etc. But yeah, basically, a lot of coaches offer, application reviews, ding analyses, etc. I'm very happy to do that. So, please feel free to reach out. I have my Leland profile link on one of the earlier slides, as well as one of the later slides. So there will be opportunities to get that if you would like to work with me. Continuing on, in terms of assessing your application. So if you're going to assess your application on your own, what I recommend doing is just looking at it from a few different perspectives and see, okay, like, how would I honestly rate myself along these? It can be a 1 to 5. It can be like an expectations, above expectations, etc. And I would look through all of these qualities that I've put here. So thinking about professional success, basically that's, do you stand out from people with similar jobs and similar experience to you? Are you someone who is consistently outperforming them? This is something that's very important to business schools. Actually, one of the common recommendation questions is essentially, how does this candidate compare to others at a similar level, similar company, etc. Another one is academic success. So this is really important because you are applying to a school. So they want to make sure that you can handle the classes, especially because MBAs do have a bit of a rap for being, a bit of like a 2-year party, etc. These schools don't want that. They want people who are actually going to contribute to a good learning environment, who are going to succeed, who are going to be engaged, etc. So, they tend to look for stuff like your, grades, your standardized test scores, etc. Leadership potential. This one is extremely important, and I'm highlighting this because a lot of people don't think about this, but an MBA is not just a place to get your next job. It's a place to develop as a future leader. And these schools are, like any top school that you're applying to, they're looking for people who aren't just going to be really good individual contributors, but who are going to be people who will be leaders one day, who will be running teams, business units, companies, etc. For leadership potential, though, you don't need to have led a team or directly manage someone to show leadership potential. What they want to see is, have you demonstrated a desire to grow as a leader, to learn? Do you mentor people? Are you able to influence people who you don't have direct power over? How do you work cross-functionally in order to align people with different interests, backgrounds, incentives, etc.? Next one is growth potential. So this is another one that's really important because you are about to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get higher education, which means that you should always be trying to grow as a person. And what they look for here is, are you already trying to better yourself consistently? Are you taking on, new opportunities? Are you asking for feedback proactively? Are you growing from it? Very important. This is why, like HBS, they have one of their essays on curiosity and growth. It's because they want people who fit this mold. Next section is MBA/post MBA story. So this is basically, what do you want to do, short-term, long-term? How does an MBA fit into it? And like what skills are you trying to get, etc. Obviously, very important, because if you can't tell this story, then why are you trying to go to this school? It's definitely something that I see a lot of issues with, which I will go into in future slides. Another one is school fit. So basically, do they think that you are a good culture fit for the school? All schools have slightly different things that they are looking for. The best way to suss this out is by speaking with people who go to these schools, and just trying to see if your application positions you as someone who would fit really well in that type of ethos. Another one is maximizing school offerings. So basically, this is, when you get to the school, are you actually going to make the most of the experience? Are you intentional, and do you know exactly what you want to do? And are you actually going to follow through on it? This is something, again, I keep saying this, but it's another really important thing. And finally, extracurriculars. I'd actually consider extracurriculars to be one of the less important aspects of an application, especially if you work in a long hours type job like consulting, banking, private equity, etc. Then they don't expect you to work 100 hours and then go and be on the board of a nonprofit, blah, 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 blah. So I do think that extracurriculars can be overblown. However, they do help in that they show a different side of you outside of work. Oftentimes, if you have leadership experience, that can come from your extracurriculars, etc. Cool. So now I will dive into some common pitfalls that I see. So these are, again, sort of like breaking down some of the categories that I mentioned earlier. I have a couple slides on this, and then I will check the chat for some more questions. So if you haven't been posting questions, please feel free to. And if you have been, please keep going. Okay. So first pitfall that I see is not framing your performance against expectations. So people often think about this just as like, oh, are you getting promoted early? But this is also stuff around, like showing strong performance ratings that are above average. It's like if you get any kind of award or like a spot bonus for doing a good job at work, if you're taking on like a project where, it's normally reserved for someone in the rank above you, but you're taking it on as a stretch, those are great things to show that you are performing at a higher level, that you are always trying to move up, etc. And people often don't talk about this stuff. They kind of just say, oh, I did this job and these are my responsibilities. And that's what they put in the resume. That's what they put in the rest of the application. And that is not enough for what these schools are looking for. Another one, kind of on this note, is not highlighting where you take on responsibilities outside of your normal job. So the people who are looking at these applications, they generally know what people do in their jobs, but any role will always have slight, slight differences to it. And what I like to tell, my clients to do is to identify, okay, when are you actually doing your job versus stepping outside of it and doing something that is more than that? And, this shows that you can go above and beyond. It shows, it's like if you're trying to get new skills, or just shows like general sort of like intellectual curiosity. And this is something that, it can show really well, for example, in a short answer. Like Stanford has like the impact essays, and that's a great place to, kind of just like spend a few words and mention it. Or, it's like if your recommenders, talk about this, that's another great thing for them to mention. But a lot of people don't really think about this. They kind of just assume that, they just need to talk about like their main responsibilities. And again, it's like the main responsibilities are great and you have to do well on those and show that you're doing well on those. But if you can show that you're doing more than that, it's even better. So next topic is not talking enough about leadership. So I've already gone into this quite a bit. So yeah, basically this is so important. You don't need to have directly manage someone, but just like think about ways that you've demonstrated leadership in your work or outside of your work, and make sure to hammer that in if you haven't already. That is in the essays and the resume and your recommendations, like everywhere. Leader, 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 leader. And then the last thing, low GPA/test scores. So if you have a low GPA, it's like it's not going to kill you. But some ways that you can try to address that are, maybe taking some classes at a a local school that are relevant to business, or getting your test scores higher, getting some type of like certification on something that helps demonstrate readiness. Like let's say that you didn't do great on the GMAT, and then on the math section, maybe you can take like an intro statistics class to show, hey, look, it's like maybe I don't test well, but I was able to learn this material anyway, or something like that. Okay. Next section is the more sort of like story related issues that I see people generally making mistakes in. So the first one is not showing progress or interest in your post MBA goals. And basically what happens here is like, if you don't really explain what you want to do and why in enough depth, then it can come across as generic, or maybe they don't really believe that it's something that you really want. So what you want to do is find ways of showing times when you've made steps towards those post MBA goals. It's not like you're saying, oh, like I want to do consulting, so I have to have done consulting before business school. But maybe it's like you do like a rotation with another team, or you do like a cross-functional project that's about like strategy or something like that. And then that kind of shows, hey, you see, I talked about wanting to do this, and I'm making an effort to learn about this space in the way that I can. However, I need business school in order to really make that pivot. And that comes across a lot more genuine than, oh yeah, I'd like to do consulting. Next one, not aligning your growth goals with the school values. So, this is just something where it's like, it may demonstrate sort of like that lack of culture fit. So like one great example here is like with Stanford, there was so much about like feedback and influence and like EQ and like emotional maturity and soft skills. And if you don't talk about that in your essays, then it may come across as if you are maybe not really getting at what makes that school special. On that note, lack of specificity is another thing. So two things around this. One is just like, not just saying, oh, like this is what I want to do, but also it's saying why you want to do it, like tying each thing to your goals and how it will help you get there can be really powerful, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I want to take a finance class. And it's like, why? It's like, okay, well, maybe you want to take a financial modeling class because you want to, you want to work in, it's like you want to work in like FP&A, and you really want to, get good at Excel, and, learn how these companies make decisions or something. And like even something like that, which I literally just made up, is still miles better than just saying, oh yeah, like I'll take this class to get finance skills. And then the other aspect of specificity that I really push my clients on is trying to figure out what makes a school unique. So even in, even with a course that's offered at multiple schools, there will be a different professor, there'll be slightly different focus areas, or there are certain things that only certain schools have. And it's really important to kind of pinpoint that. So one thing that I like to think about with this is, if this school that you are reapplying to has, like if it were ranked 10 spots lower, would you still want to go there? And these are things that I often see people not doing in their initial application that, then, we need to spend a lot of time on in the reapplication. Oh, there was a volume issue, but it seems like it's better now. Okay, well, that's good. Sorry, I'm just going through all the questions now. Let's see. How much does changing recommenders matter for a reapplicant? So this depends. Basically, if you have the same direct supervisor, you can definitely use them again for your recommendation. However, they will need to write a new one. So, and you want them to write a new one anyway, because hopefully in the 6, 9, 12 months plus that since you applied the first time, you have grown as a person, and it comes across a lot better if you aren't the only one who's saying it. Like if your boss is saying it, then that's great. In terms of someone who isn't your direct supervisor, again, it's like if they have something new to say, then that's great. I would say the time when it definitely makes sense to get a new recommender is if your second recommender was someone maybe early in your career, then, and it's like you don't work for them anymore. That's a person who I would change, because what are they going to say that's new about you at that point? And hopefully in that time since you've applied, you've made new connections and you've met new people who know more about you, who can speak about you in a different way, and then can then put you in a different light for your second application. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Soon. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And then next one, how does the admissions committee view a candidate that changes their short-term goals as a reapplicant? Is it okay if you can justify the change? If you can justify the change, then it's fine, but make sure that you justify it well. I think this is like a very case-by-case basis type thing, though. So this is the type of thing where it would like it probably makes more sense like if you wanted to reach out, like we like that could be something that we could work on together in like a coaching capacity. If the school's essays remain the same, do you still need to present new essays for those same questions? Yes, you definitely do. You can use some of the same content, but the essays should be sort of like better versions of the ones that you did last time. I will get into this more in a future slide. Is there such a thing as reapplying too soon or too late? How many years later is still okay? I mean, again, this is another sort of case-by-case thing. It really depends. Like, there's always going to be people on the young and old end of the MBA class. So, it's a lot of this just really depends on your situation, and if you can, explain why you're applying at that point and why you still need the MBA. I'd say in terms of reapplying too soon, the example I gave earlier is probably the one where it's like if you applied in round 3 and then you reapply in round 1 and your application is basically the same, then that's not really going to matter. But again, if you want to apply years later, then that is completely fine. And as I mentioned earlier, I've actually worked with people who have reapplied and years later and gotten in. So it's definitely possible. Okay. Keep the questions coming. I'm going to continue. So these are some aspects of an application that I would also recommend if you are doing a self-review that you look at. One is intentionality. So basically that everything that you do, you're doing for a reason, that when you take on new experiences, you're able to tie them to your goals. And basically just that everything kind of makes sense within each other. Specificity, I've talked about this a little bit already, but basically trying not to just be, give generic answers, but show that you've really done your research, show that you understand what makes a school special, show that you've really thought through why you need this MBA at a really deep level and that you understand exactly what you're getting into. Cohesion, basically this is making sure that each aspect of your application makes sense with each other. I've seen people, for example, talk about how they are really strong communicators and how that's something that they really feel is a superpower of theirs. And then in the recommendation, it's the recommender's oh, they could probably work on their communication more or something. And that's a pretty extreme example, but it's you want everything to kind of fit in with each other. And finally, humbleness. So you want to show that you are proud of what you've accomplished and that you have accomplished a lot, but you also need to make it very clear that you have a lot of space to grow and that you want to be growing. I've seen people only talk about how they would contribute to a campus, and they make it seem almost like the school would be lucky to have them. And it's very easy, to have somebody get rubbed the wrong way as a result of that. Okay. It's just a reminder again of once you figured out what you did wrong in your application the first time, make sure that you're actively looking for ways to address any weaknesses. Don't just let things fall in your lap. Super important, and especially, it's now you're, a couple months away. There's still time, from round 1, and then a few more from round 2. There's still plenty of time to make progress, especially towards those sort of post-MBA goal type things. Okay. So now we're going to talk a bit about some ways to show growth in your application. Some of these won't be super new, others might be. So I'll just go through them, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. First one, promotions, increases in responsibility. This is pretty standard, but basically this is, this is great. It shows that you are growing, that you're performing well, that you are growing hopefully as a leader as well. New skills is another one. I mentioned this earlier as well. Basically, just it shows that you are constantly trying to, grow and learn new things, which you should be trying to do if you're, going to business school. International experience. This is one I haven't mentioned yet, but international experience is seen super valuable by business schools, especially if you have experience in multiple countries or regions, because it shows that you have the ability to work with different types of people, that you have a certain amount of curiosity and empathy, hopefully, towards people of different backgrounds, etc. And it's also really good because then you can talk about this stuff to people who in your class who don't have that experience, and they can learn from you. Okay. Movement towards post-MBA goals. Already covered this one. we'll continue on. New learnings about the school. So basically with this, it's like if you are, it's like you should be continuing to speak with students and alum, especially people who have similar backgrounds or similar post-MBA goals to you. And then it's like you can even like cite them even by name if you want. I've seen that be very impactful, where it's like people talk about, hey, it's like I spoke with this person who wants to do similar things to me, and they were able to accomplish it at this school doing XYZ things. So that's what I want to do. And it shows that you've done your research. It shows that it's realistic, and it shows that you, and it shows like a higher likelihood that you're going to succeed. So it's great. And finally, standardized tests. So if your tests are still valid, obviously, you can still use them. I would just say, it's like if your scores are below the median, I would definitely consider retaking it. It's not just about, showing readiness, but I think it also is a really good signal that you are really taking your application seriously, or your reapplication rather seriously, and that you're doing everything possible that you can to improve things. Some more stuff about reapplication. So goals. I would say generally you want your goals to be pretty similar to the original ones. What you can do to make them more impactful here is show like, okay, what have you learned that has, maybe slightly changed the way that you view your goals, or that has taught you what you need, like more about what you need to do to accomplish them, and things like that. So, it's like maybe if you are, trying to switch from, like marketing to finance, maybe you take on a project where you are the marketing contact for your finance business partner. And then you can talk about how you've learned all this stuff about finance by talking to this person, which, only makes it clearer that you, like that you need to take these types of classes, that you need to get these types of skills, et cetera, in order to make that transition well. In terms of reapplication materials, I mentioned this earlier, but everything needs to be updated, and things can be similar, but again, it's like you want to show how much you've grown. So there should be new things, especially in something like a resume. If you don't have any new bullets, then that kind of implies that you haven't really done anything of note since the last time that you applied, which is a bit of a red flag. Other stuff on your resume. So some things that I see as common issues that I try to correct in a reapplication, not enough focus on leadership within the resume, leadership, collaboration, any of those soft skills, because people tend to just focus very much on, like these are my standard job responsibilities or something, and not showing how they excelled and how, they, really were a leader and someone who people looked up to. Other things, weird formats, and too much jargon. So, people coming from non-traditional backgrounds, especially, this is a risk. And I try to get rid of this whenever I am working with a new client or a reapplying client. And finally, the reapplication essay. So with this, generally you'll have somewhere between like 250 to 500 words, depending on the school. So you'll really need to be judicious on what you include here. So really prioritize talking about updates here that address weaknesses in your previous application. You don't need to specifically say, oh, I'm mentioning this because this is a weakness, but just like addressing it is a very good way of prioritizing. The other one is just like anything where you can show that you've continued to grow towards the post-MBA goals that you have. Okay, so we are at the end of the formal part of the presentation. So I'm going to do a quick spiel, and then I will get into the rest of the Q&A. First off, if you would like to work with me, please feel free to reach out. I have my profile link here. as well as in a QR code. I will send this deck out afterwards as well. Also, if you've found this helpful, please leave a review. Basically, what will happen is once the event is over, you'll be asked if you enjoyed the event, and then you'll give like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So then hopefully you'll give a thumbs up. And, if you rate me 5 stars, that really helps with, me growing my business. So would really appreciate if you all can do that. And yeah, thanks everyone. I will now go into more questions. If there were any questions that came up earlier that you want more information on, please feel free to post that here as well. Otherwise, I will start with Nishi's question here. What part of the reapplication do schools actually pay the most attention to? Essays, resume, extra updates? Is it a little bit of everything? It is a little bit of everything. As I mentioned earlier, oftentimes schools will actually have like a different member of the admissions committee looking through your application this time around. So you want to show strength in all aspects. And if they, because it's like if they do compare your previous application to this one, you want to show growth within each part. And if they don't, you want to show your best self within the application anyway. So you definitely need to focus on making improvements to all of them. Obviously, there will be some aspects of your application that were stronger or weaker. Again, happy to help you determine where that is, and then you would want to spend more time there. But you do want to improve everything a bit. Let's see. Then next question, is there significant value in trying to improve your standardized scores if they're already at median for an older candidate, low undergrad GPA, high master's GPA? So I would say if you there's always some amount of value that you can get from improving your standardized test scores. A lot of it is just a matter of how much time will it take you. So if you took the GMAT, for example, recently, and you felt like you underperformed, I would definitely recommend that you retake it again, even if you did happen to get to the median, because that does help improve things. In terms of reporting, they do report the undergrad GPA for the purpose of rankings. Again, they're not only caring about rankings though. So if you have a high master's GPA, that can be useful, because then you can say, hey, it's like, I didn't take undergrad seriously enough, or I had like an illness or something like that. And then I realized actually, later on that I really needed a good, I really needed to, focus on academics as a way of learning. And then that's why I went back and got my master's. And then that's why I want an MBA or something like that. But yeah, to go back to your main question though, yes, they will have to report the undergrad GPA as well, regardless of how it is. Let's see. Okay. And if you have more follow-ups on that, please feel free to post as well. Okay, Andy, do schools always refer to past applications when evaluating a reapplicant? So they don't guarantee that they will, but it is one of those things that's like, it is pretty common, and like you should, in your reapplication, you should submit it with the expectation that they will look at your previous application. That way, if they do, it's great, and if they don't, then it's it's fine as well. But the risk, of course, is that if you submit a completely different application, then there might just be like, okay, like what happened to this person? Would switching rounds applying in round 1 versus round 2 improve chances for a reapplicant? So I would say here, the most important thing is to apply when you're ready. So, like, if you were going to submit the same application regardless of round, yeah, of course, it's most likely going to be better that you submit it in round 1. Again, with the caveat of if you applied in round 3, then you might not have enough time to grow. However, if you expect that you might get a promotion, or that you might take on like a really big project or rotation that is more in line with your post MBA goals, or if you think that it's like there's going to be like a big update, and like maybe it's like your startup is raising money or something like that. Like, in those cases, it's always better to wait until the next round when you actually will have that update to provide, because you might not be able to submit that update otherwise. And you want to put, it's like you want to put your best foot forward. And the differences in chances of getting in based on different rounds is not enough to outweigh that type of additional strength. Schools say that they love reapplicants. Is there any data that schools publish on the acceptance rate for reapplicants? Most schools say that it is pretty similar to the acceptance rate for like a normal applicant. But again, it's one of those things where it's like they'll always say, it's like we'll consider your application, etc. And it's like if you improve your application, then of course you have a much better chance of of getting in the next time around. And that's the only part that you can really control. So like I would focus on, like, as a reapplicant, making your next application as good as it can be, and then letting the school kind of figure out the logistics and all that behind it.